Adam Taxin here at Chabad of Uptown in New Orleans, Louisiana, with Rabbi Zelig Rivkin, who is the original shliach, emissary that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, sent to Louisiana here in New Orleans. He's joining me now, and one of the two newest shliachs in this general area, that is Rabbi Peretz, what's your last name again? Kazen. Of Chabad of Baton Rouge, which is a new Chabad, and there now is an official Chabad of Tulane, though it's all in the same area as Chabad of Uptown. It's the same general area. And interestingly, with Chabad of Baton Rouge, you're in your first year here? Or you've been here over second year. There was nothing from Chabad between, I guess, New Orleans, though you're west of New Orleans, and all you had on the northern Gulf Coast was New Orleans. Tallahassee isn't even really on the coast, but between New Orleans and Tallahassee there was nothing. But in just the last 3 years, there have been Chabad centers set up in Destin, Florida. I don't know them too well. I hear great things about them from my friends the Fogels, who were there during the hurricane. Then there's Chabad Rabbi Hall in Chabad of Southern Mississippi, which is the only one in Mississippi, but it's specified as Chabad of Southern Mississippi. Very close with Rabbi Yosef Goldwasser in Mobile, Alabama, Chabad of Mobile. They're doing well. They just have a center. And now I'm meeting just a little bit west of here, hour and 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, just about.
Rabbi Kazen. And two of them, this is where I happen to be. I'm doing coverage of other things from New Orleans this week. But we're in Exodus, really around the middle. Is this the very middle of Exodus?
Smack in the middle.
Smack in the middle, the very middle of Exodus. It's Parsha Mishpatim, which is what chapters? I have 21 through 24, I think. And this has more commandments by far than any other chapter of the Torah. And it's not really a specific narrative. Like in Exodus, you have certain things happening. It's almost historical, which the Torah is not meant to be. But that's the way. Genesis. That's the way Genesis is. Here, it's all over the place. In fact, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to let the rabbis jump in. What do we want to talk about in Parsha Mishpatim? This might be the least specific. This might be the most all over the place reading from Torah of all.
So I would like to talk about a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov.
Okay. Paul Schultz, remember we have an audience that is not necessarily too knowledgeable about all this, not necessarily Jewish. Explain who the Baal Shem Tov is.
So the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement, and one of the things he taught was the idea of a multi-layered understanding of the Torah. The Torah has its simple meaning. The Torah has its deeper levels of understanding. And some of them are based upon the mystical, some of them are based upon psychological. So there was a teaching that the Baal Shem Tov gave on a passage in the Torah, which is in chapter 5, verse number 20, chapter 6, verse number 5, which says as follows: if you will see the donkey of your enemy crouching under its weight, you may want to choose not to help him. You shouldn't do that. You should give them assistance. Also, if Tazavim, you should help them. So the Baal Shem Tov interpreted it in a more personal way, which can be applicable to every person and to all days and to all times. And it says as follows: the word chamer, which means donkey, also has the meaning of chomer, materiality, or the substance of a person, which refers to the body. So when you take a look at the body, sometimes the body seems to you to be the enemy of the soul. The soul strives for spirituality, for holiness. The body is more interested in a material expression of need. So you would think it's an enemy, and you see that it's crouching under its load, under that it's carrying, which is the load that is imposed upon it by God giving us the Torah, the Bible, and all of its commandments, and therefore the body says, I'm too lazy, I would not like to be carrying that load. So you would think that the way to deal with the body is to break it, as there has been a stream within Judaism that says, you fast, you deny the body, and in that way you break its will until it sort of gets out of the way of the soul to do its job. The Baal Shem Tov taught that that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is you work with the body. You try to explain the body until the body starts understanding God's greatness and our purpose in the world. And then the body not only does it willingly, does it with joy, and joins together with the soul to fulfill its purpose in this world. So that's one of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov.
I was going to add, and interestingly, because we're in Louisiana, a place with a state which has strong Catholic heritage as anything, as any state out there, that it's really different from Catholicism is illustrated in that, in the sense that they have to have celibacy, for example, and the body is meant to be pure, original sin, all that stuff in there, as opposed to Judaism says, look, this is who we are, we're not perfect, we have an animal soul, as opposed to, you know what I'm getting at here?
I do. I just don't think it's just other religions within Judaism.
Oh, yeah, of course.
There are other streams, and some of them actually followed a system that denied the body. In other words, that the body is not something that's redeemable, and the only way for you to be able to express the soul properly, your spiritual desires, would be by eliminating the body's need altogether. So fasting was something that a person indulged themselves in, and that breaks the body, and breaking the body is not good. There may be times when it's necessary to do a certain amount of fasting and so on, but it's not necessarily the way we approach what we need to do. We need to create a way that we can join body and soul together in their united purpose. And actually it's based on the Shema, which says, you shall love God with all of your heart and with all of your souls. When it says all of your heart, it says it not libcha with one base, which is the word for your heart, but levavacha with two bases, which means two hearts. There are two hearts of the person. And we have to find a way to influence the animal within ourselves, that desire to also become one who will love God, who will love spirituality and recognize its goodness even for the body.
I'll let you join in. We must have like 50 different commandments. You just go to a regular place. They'll just show you what Parsha Mishpatim is like. You go from chapter 22, verse 17. Do not allow a sorceress or sorcerer to live. Then you have 18. Any person who sleeps with an animal must be put to death. With an animal must be put to death by stoning. By the way, Mardi Gras, which is going on right around now, is decadent, but I'm not sure it's that decadent in the French Quarter. 19. Whoever slaughters to gods other than God alone must be destroyed, i.e. put to death. It's just one commandment of the other, and you get other ones where there's not a single commandment in the whole reading. Here, I don't even know how many it is, but I'll let you jump in, Rabbi Kazen.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Adam, for this opportunity.
Thank you.
And you mentioned how, where this Torah portion fits in with its vast number of commandments that are included here. In the book of Exodus, where the Torah portion comes in, is right after the Torah portion of Yisro, Jethro, where we read about Moses' father-in-law, Yisro, coming and joining the Jewish people in the desert in their encampment, and the subsequent revelation at Sinai and the giving of the Ten Commandments. And it's ironic how, when you take a look at the opening of the Torah portion and throughout the Torah portion, as mentioned, the vast number of commandments that are mentioned here and given in this Torah portion really are mostly dealing with issues that are almost, you would say, deplorable ways of or situations.
A term we Trump supporters are familiar with.
There was no pun intended in that. And such as a person who steals, or sorcery, like was mentioned before, or a person slavery, or lots of other commandments that are involved over here. And then it spans also, it goes on to discuss some of the agricultural laws and some of the holidays that are important to Jewish life. And an interesting thought that was presented to me that I want to share with the audience here was, if you look right at the opening of the Torah portion and you frame it in where it's taking place, right after the revelation of Almighty God to his people and making them his people at Mount Sinai. And what does he start talking about if a person steals and is unable to pay? So the Jewish position on that is that that person is put to work in order to repay what they stole if they're unable to pay it. And they have to pay back double that. And if they're unable to, they're able to be sold for work. Now, today we don't actually do that, but nevertheless, that is the Jewish approach to it. And what's fascinating here is that here you have the climax of the whole of our history, almost, where we had revelation at Sinai, and it was the ultimate moment. And nevertheless, right afterwards, what does God tell us? Commandments relating to a person who may have stolen money, who doesn't value what somebody else has and feel that whatever it is, I'm able to take what somebody else wants, what belongs to someone else. And what's interesting is that if you look at the underlying message here, it's not about if a person steals or how to behave with that person, but we call that person an Eved Ivri. a Jewish slave. And that's because regardless of how that person behaved, yes, they have to make amends for it. Yes, they do have to fix what they did wrong, but we always regard them as one of ours. And that's a very, very powerful message, I think, that we see that following a high, we know that sometimes there can come a low, but we have to always remember who we really are and our intrinsic value that we have. And even if there's a low which drives the person to a point where they have to be sold to be able to repay what they have taken unrightfully, nevertheless, we still call them a Jewish slave, an Eved Ivri. And that's something that I think can really help us sometimes when life gives us those lows that it sometimes sends us.
I just want to, sorry, you weren't done?
I'm done.
I want to add one point. So that's a little bit, that would be more in the criminal law aspect, but this Parsha, reading from the Torah, also has a lot of the foundations of tort law, damages. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have any formal Jewish education realistically, so I don't have that background, so I do not have a lot of Talmud study, but isn't the first thing that a lot of people studying the Torah covered, maybe chapter 21, verse 33, and I may be wrong about this, about if a donkey falls into a pit, how people are compensated. Is that one of the first things people learn when they're learning the Talmud, or am I wrong? Because that just seems kind of like famous to me.
So that's a good point. Yes, it's not specifically that example, but there are other examples here that
but people do start with tort law. That's generally the first
They
thing?
do start with court law usually, either with laws pertaining to returning lost objects or to laws of damages, such as the example that the Torah gives if a person's donkey falls into a pit that was dug by somebody else, which is a basic and fundamental question of liability for your actions, which today, even though you don't necessarily have a donkey and make a pit, but are you responsible for your sidewalks? It could be a simpler question. If you don't shovel your snow, I'm from New York originally, so this was always a big deal. Make sure to shovel, but make sure to shovel the snow, because if someone slips, besides the fact you should be a decent person, but you're going to be liable for that. Presenting a danger to the public, and also laws of an object which you're given to guard. There's also a set of laws that are discussed, 4 types of guardians, and many others. So yes, technically speaking, it's not only that you have a Torah portion packed with mitzvot, but you actually have a Torah portion which is the basis for volumes of the Talmud. Whole tractates are discussed based on the precepts that are discussed in this Torah portion, and obviously subsequently you have volumes and volumes and volumes of commentary and discussion and response that were written about what's herein. So I would offer people that if Torah study is something that intrigues you, this is definitely a great Torah portion to start with. Whet your appetite, because it's as Ethics of Our Fathers tells us, dig in it because you're never really going to end it. And it's a tremendous amount, and it's our heritage and it's yours. So get involved, take advantage.
I want to add one more thing. Actually, I'll just give you a chance to mention your website and that you're on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. If you're on there, it's Rabbi, it's Peretz, Peretz Kazen. You're on Facebook. Are you on Twitter? And
not on Twitter, but we are on Facebook at Chabad of Baton Rouge and also Chabad at LSU. And we have a website. It's Chabad BR, so it's CHABAD BR for BatonRouge.com, as well as ChabadNewOrleans.com and JewishLouisiana.com, all affiliate websites of Chabad here, and Chabad Tulane Chabad.com, all affiliate websites of Chabad here in Louisiana. We have a wealth of information and resources available to everyone free of charge on a 24/6 basis.
I have to tie in one more thing to the Parsha as I'm a visitor to New Orleans. I was earlier this morning, some of you may have watched, totally different context, at the French market Café du Monde, which is kosher, by the way. The beignets and coffees there, maybe not the highest Chabad standard, but pretty high standard. But that whole area by the Mississippi River was known as a place where slaves were traded, obviously an ugly part of American history, but I got to tie in American slavery, New Orleans, to this week's reading because it starts off about the laws of the slave. Obviously there was slavery in the Torah, and because I'm playing tourist here, maybe you can just talk a little bit about the concept of a Jewish slave and a non-Jewish slave. I threw that out of nowhere, but you know.
Is that a question?
Yeah, it's an open-ended question, like just so people can learn a little bit about slavery.
Again, there are many things that, when brought down to a practical level, it's to be taken within the context of the time when it was talked about. But on a spiritual plane, there is different types of slaves, meaning the word Eved doesn't mean slave necessarily, it can mean a servant. And that means person who serves God. And there are people who serve at a higher level, people serve at a lower level. And the different types of slaves that exist out there are different levels of service. So for example, there can be a level of service that comes from just obedience. That's a level which has its advantages because you don't ask any questions, you do what you need to do. On the other hand, there doesn't seem to be a lot of feeling or motivation involved, you're just being obedient. And then there can be a way to serve God when a person serves with a lot of feeling, like the Torah says. He says, I love my master, I love my work that I'm doing. So there are people who serve God with a great amount of enthusiasm and feeling. The downside of that, by the way, is that it only goes as far as my feeling takes me, where obedience takes me all the way, just whatever I have to do. Mm-hmm. So when we study slavery, it's not just a practical question, because the Torah is eternal, and because the Torah is eternal, it means that it's applicable to all times and all places, and even though it may not be applicable in the practical expression that you have here, but on a different layer, or at a different layer, at a more subtle layer, it also includes a lesson in everyday life of how a person interacts with their environment, with their people that are around them, and how they interact with God. And in this case, being a servant, like God says, Avavahem, they are my servants, not servants to others, which means that God acquired us, put that in quotation marks, when he took us out of Egypt and made it his people. So at that point, we become a servant. Our choice is what kind of servant we want to be, or we can combine the best of both, whatever it may be, and then these laws become more applicable in that sense.
I want to clear up a potential misconception, though. From reading the Torah, especially here, it seems like the Torah's view is that sometimes it's almost passive and active thing. Someone sells themselves into slavery because they're broke, or they commit a crime, and that's the way of sort of doing restitution for their crime. But it seems like the Torah has a pretty negative attitude towards slavery. That's why they have to put something in their ear, they have to drill a hole in their ear. It's like, don't do it, but if you're going to do it, is that a fair characterization? You should really try to be servants to God, not slaves to man. I mean, that's the way I read it. Unless I'm wrong. I could study it more thoroughly, but that's the impression.
I'm not sure that it's true. There's a prescribed amount of time of how long a person is going to be a slave. Mm-hmm. If a person wants to go beyond that, so then it would seem that it's inappropriate. Mm-hmm. Because Torah prescribes to 6 years or whatever amount of time that a person is going to be a slave. On the other hand, the method of slavery, which especially when you follow the rules of the Torah of how a person treats a slave, the Talmud uses the expression, you buy a slave, you bought a master. Right. Because you have to have a way of treating the slave. You give him to eat what you eat, you treat him with clothing the way you wear things, you can't abuse the person, etc., etc. It's more like a hired person for 6 years. So however you want to look at it, I'm not sure the Torah looks at that as negative. There are times when a person shouldn't sell themselves as a slave because they can do more things when they're within their own jurisdiction, not subject to somebody else's desires. But at the same time, when necessary and under certain circumstances, it's an acceptable way of doing things.
It's not really, and it's a different type of ownership in slavery than, say, went on around here 200 years ago.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even when it comes to, if a person were to be harmed or damaged in some way because the master caused something that created damage within the person, there's payment.
There's rights. A lot of rights.
Right.
Like you mentioned, a person who buys a slave buys a master. That tells you how we really view slavery.
That was not the case 200 years ago, around here. Probably not.
Well, I wasn't there, but that's what the books tell us.
That's what they tell us. Yeah.
Okay, any final thoughts? And we can only scratch the surface of this particular reading.
Final thoughts is Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a good Shabbos. We enjoyed meeting this gentleman here.
Thanks.
And hopefully he's going to make a lot of strides into what you're doing.
Yeah. Hey, it's helpful that you reluctantly came to talk to me now. You were more eager at first.
Are we done?
But, yeah, we're done. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Cut.